Imagine a public health system on like the absolute brink of collapse. I mean, half the staff is walking out, the budget is slashed to the bone, and the structural integrity of the entire civil service is just, it's fracturing.
Yeah, completely coming apart at the seams.
Right. But then, behind closed doors, in the shadows where the public can't see, a secret benefactor has just quietly paid off all the institution's debts, essentially ensuring it survives.
Oh, wow.
And, that isn't a pitch for some political thriller. That is the exact scenario predicted by the mathematical output of a mundane geomantic chart cast for the Canadian province of Quebec. Specifically, this is mapping the week of July 13th, 2026.
Right, which is just, it's a fascinating snapshot in time.
It really is. So today we are translating the invisible undercurrents of a society in real time. We're taking the abstract math of geomancy and turning it into a concrete map of political, economic, and, social reality. And you, yes, you listening, are stepping right into the middle of this diagnostic landscape with us. Pull up a chair.
It is a profound mechanism to witness, honestly. When you cast a mundane chart, and to be precise, this one was cast manually on July 9, 2026, you are essentially forcing the chaotic momentum of an entire collective body into a readable geometric structure.
Sort of pinning it down to look at it.
Exactly. We are treating the province of Quebec as the querent, which is the subject of our inquiry. But we aren't just looking at, like, isolated symbols floating in a void. We're building a complete 12-house astrological framework.
And we're relying on the classical mundane assignments for those houses, right?
Right, specifically detailed by Deborah Holding in her work, The Houses, Temples of the Sky. So we were looking at the province's collective mood, its treasury, its government, its hidden enemies, all mapped out through these 16 geomantic figures.
And to make sure we are looking at the deepest possible layer of this, we're also applying the Astro-geomantic overlay, because we have to take those Earth-based geomantic figures and map them to the stars, basically.
Precisely. We use the overlay historically attributed to Gerard of Cremona. So, modern scholarship, particularly Stephen Skinner's brilliant work, more accurately attributes it to Gerard of Sabbioneta, a 13th century translator and astrologer.
Yeah, right. Got to give credit to the right Gerard.
Right, exactly. And what this overlay does is just profound. It doesn't merely tell us what the figures are doing on the ground. It places the 7 traditional planets into those 12 houses. It allows us to perform an essential dignity audit.
Which reveals where the astrological architecture either supports the geomantic output or just totally undermines it.
Yes.
It's like reading the structural blueprints of a society as it breathes. You look at this chart and it tells you exactly where the load-bearing walls are holding strong, where the roof is catching fire, and where the foundation is, quietly washing away.
It's a real-time diagnostic.
And for you listening, it is crucial to state right up front. Our mission today is just to distill these 16 figures into a single cohesive forecast. We are reading the mathematical and symbolic output. There is zero partisan spin here.
Absolutely none.
We do not take sides. We do not endorse policies. If we talk about the right or the left, it's just what the chart says. The chart speaks, and we simply translate its mechanics.
And I have to say, the mechanics of this specific chart are startling. When I first calculated the shield and just, looked at the bird's eye view, before even delineating the individual houses, the visual pattern was arresting. It immediately reads as a threshold chart.
Wait, okay, what exactly makes it a threshold chart as opposed to, say, a chart of stability or just a standard crisis?
It's the sheer dominance of mutable transitional figures. And there's a total absence of fixed, consolidating energy in the most critical positions.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so this is not a chart of a society resting on its laurels. It's not a chart of recovery either. It is a chart of crossing over from one definitive state to another, where the crossing itself is the dominant experience. You are on the bridge, and you just cannot stop walking.
That makes sense. And the visual that jumps right off the page for me looking at it is the repetition of the figure via the way. We have Via sitting in House 1, which represents Quebec itself, its collective identity, its public mood. But then you look directly across the chart. We also have Via in House 7, which represents the province's open opponents, its negotiating counterparts, or legal adversaries.
Via is perhaps the most demanding figure to interpret in the entire system.
Really? Why is that?
Well, structurally, it is composed of 4 single dots from top to bottom. So fire, air, water, and earth are all active, all singular. It is the moon's figure, and its element is water. It is pure transit.
Right.
It holds no fixed quality whatsoever. I mean, it is stable only in its instability.
But hold on. If Quebec is represented by Via, and its opponent is also represented by Via, what does it actually mean to go into a geopolitical or legal negotiation where the other side is just an exact mirror of yourself?
It's incredibly tricky.
I mean, if both sides are just pure shifting watery movement, is anyone actually steering the ship? How do you fight water with water?
You don't. You really don't, and that is the profound challenge embedded in this axis. When the querent and the opponent carry the exact same figure across the opposition axis, the geomantic tradition speaks of a mirroring effect.
So whatever you do, they just reflect it back?
Exactly. Confrontational strategy will utterly fail this week because the opponent simply reflects the province's own fluid momentum right back at it. There is no solid wall to push against.
Wow.
If the Quebec government tries to initiate, say, a hardline political standoff or a really aggressive legal battle, they're going to find that the other side simply shapeshifts, absorbing the blow and flowing around it. The adversarial dynamic isn't some external threat. It is a direct byproduct of the province's own internal state of flux.
So if you punch the water, you just exhaust yourself, and the water closes right back over your fist. You have to learn how to swim in it instead.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Let's look at how the government is actually handling that swim. If House 1 is the province in transit, let's look up at the top of the chart to House 10. That's the angular pillar representing the executive government, the premier, and the party in power, right?
Yes, the 10th house is the apex of power.
And we have the figure Rubius up there, the red or the reddened one.
Rubius is Mars's malefic figure. Visually, if you look at the dots, it is top-heavy. It looks like a cup turned upside down, spilling its contents.
Right, 2 dots at the top, 1, 2, 2, wait, no, 2, 1, 2, 2.
Exactly. It is fiery, volatile, inflamed, and deeply prone to rash decisions, uncontrolled passion, or even scandal. In a mundane framework, placing Rubius in the 10th house is one of the most alarming diagnostics you can generate.
Because it's the leadership just losing their cool.
Right. It signals an executive under intense, boiling pressure, reacting with anger or impulsivity rather than strategic calculation.
And it gets worse when we look at the Sabbioneta overlay. I'm looking at the planetary placements for House 10, and it's totally empty. There is no planet there at all.
Exactly. There is no dignified planetary anchor stepping in to cool the temperature.
No adult in the room.
No adult in the room. If we had, say, a strong Jupiter or a dignified Venus there, we could argue that diplomatic forces might step in and moderate the premier's office. But it is just raw, unmitigated Rubius. The executive branch stands completely exposed and, well, heated.
If the executive is that inflamed, reacting that poorly, what are they standing on? Like, what is the structural ground underneath them causing this panic?
For that, we look to the 4th house.
Right, the very bottom of the chart. The 4th house governs the foundational ground of the province. It's land, its housing stock, agriculture, and the political opposition. And sitting right there at the base is a missio loss.
A missio is the figure of things slipping outside of one's grasp. Its elemental composition is heavy on the bottom, lacking air and fire at the top. It represents an outgoing tide.
So literal erosion.
Literally. When placed in the 4th house, the foundational ground of the province is eroding. We are looking at a week where housing values might be slipping, critical agricultural resources are depleted, or the political opposition is losing its structural foothold.
The mechanics of this 4th and 10th house axis are just staggering. Think about it like a literal building for a second. If House 4 is the foundation and House 10 is the roof, we have an eroding foundation with a missio and a roof that is actively on fire with Rubius.
It's a structural nightmare.
In a strictly analytical sense, this isn't just random bad luck. The mechanics show an executive making panicked, inflamed decisions because the ground beneath them is literally washing away. Loss in the foundational sector directly feeds that executive instability.
And because the province's overall state is via moving at high speed, everything is happening way too fast for the executive to easily repair the foundation or put out the fire. They're just wildly reacting as they slide forward.
Okay, so if the foundation is washing away, how is the government paying for the damage? That brings us to the Treasury, the financial axis of the chart, House 2 and House 8.
Right.
House 2 governs the province's revenue, its banks, its direct income. Here we see Caput Draconis, the head of the dragon.
This is actually a highly favorable figure for accumulation. The head of the dragon is the north node of the moon, representing new inflows, growth, and the ingestion of resources.
So money is coming in.
Yes, it indicates a nascent positive financial development for Quebec's treasury. However, geomancy demands we look at the deeper planetary machinery. The Gerard overlay places Mercury in the sign of Aries in this 2nd house.
Okay, for those of us who don't cast astrological charts every day, What does it mean to have Mercury in Aries here? You mentioned off-air that it's peregrine. What does that actually look like in the real world?
Right, so a planet is peregrine when it lacks any essential dignity. It isn't in the sign it rules, nor is it exalted, but it also isn't in its fall or detriment.
It's just sort of there.
It is essentially wandering. Think of it like a
Ah.
traveler couch surfing in a foreign land. It has no deep anchoring power, no keys to the house. Now, Mercury governs communication, commerce, and data. Aries is the sign of the ram-fast, fiery, impulsive, eager to initiate.
Right.
So you have the financial accumulation of the dragon's head, but it is being articulated by a wandering, impulsive Mercury.
Okay, I see. So this isn't a measured, detailed, quarterly economic report. This looks like hasty, impulsive financial announcements. The government, or maybe the central bank, sees that quick influx of cash from Caput Draconis and immediately rushes to the microphones to declare a massive financial victory before the data has even settled.
They're outrunning their own supply lines, essentially.
And this vulnerability is mirrored across the axis, right?
Yeah.
In House 8, the sector governing shared debts, mortality, and systemic crisis management. Here we have Fortuna Minor, the lesser fortune.
Yeah.
The lesser fortune implies there is protection, but it comes with an asterisk, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Fortuna Minor means the benefit is real, but it is not self-sustaining. It relies entirely on external support or temporary conditions,
Like a Band-Aid.
like a sudden windfall or a short-term loan, rather than a deep, permanent well of wealth. Quebec has a financial cushion for its shared debts this week, but it is fleeting.
And what does the overlay say there?
The overlay gives us the moon in Libra here, which is also peregrine. Libra seeks balance and diplomacy, suggesting the province will use a very tactful, balanced approach to managing its debt obligations. But again, without essential dignity, that diplomatic shield is incredibly thin. The province is temporarily protected financially, but they really cannot afford to get comfortable.
Okay, so if the government is rushing to the microphones to make hasty financial announcements, how is that information actually traveling to the public? What is happening to the communication networks? Let's look at the communications and law axis House 3 and House 9.
Let's do it.
House 3 rules media, local transit, roads, and the daily communication landscape. We have Caput Draconis here, the tail of the dragon.
Now, if the head of the dragon ingests and accumulates, the tail of the dragon purges and excretes. It is the south node of the moon, bringing endings, severance, and the clearing out of old matter.
So what does that mean for House 3?
In the third house, the mechanics dictate a systematic contraction in the media landscape. Transit links might be severed, local communication networks are disrupted, or journalistic relationships are ending. It is an active exit from the local sphere.
Oh, man. But then you look directly across the wheel to House 9, which rules the courts, jurisprudence, universities, and higher knowledge. And sitting there, just shining like a beacon, is Letitia Joy.
It really is a beacon. Letitia is one of the most uplifting, expansive figures in the entire geomantic canon. Visually, it looks like an arch or a dome extending upward. It indicates profound optimism, expansion, and success.
So what does that look like on the ground?
In the ninth house, this points to a major judicial victory, a highly successful legal maneuver, or a massive breakthrough in the university sector.
And the overlay here is just incredible. The planetary machinery aligns perfectly with the geomantic symbol.
It is a textbook confirmation. The Gerard overlay places Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio in the ninth house.
And Jupiter's totally at home there, right?
Well, Jupiter's the natural planetary ruler of the ninth house. It governs law, higher wisdom, and judges. While Jupiter's technically peregrine here by fine, its placement in the investigative, penetrating sign of Scorpio within its own natural domain heavily supports the expansive reading of Letitia. The courts and the academic institutions are operating with immense investigative depth and optimism.
The contrast is just staggering. If you are a transit worker or a local media journalist in Quebec this week, you are dealing with the purging energy of the dragon's tail. You're losing ground. But if you are a constitutional lawyer or a university dean, you are absolutely popping champagne.
The chart is deeply, deeply divided.
And that division becomes even more perilous when we examine how the government attempts to rally its allies and its people. Let's look at the morale and allies axis, House 5 and House 11.
This axis is fascinating.
House 5 governs public morale, entertainment, and the province's ambassadors or diplomatic envoys. We have Quilla here, which translates to the girl or beauty. It's a figure of cultural ease, surface harmony, and soft diplomacy.
Right.
And across the wheel in House 11, which governs the legislature, policy allies, and councils, we have acquisitio gain, the greater fortune of gathering in.
So, on a purely geomantic level, without the overlay, this axis looks incredibly harmonious. The province uses soft, pleasing diplomacy puella to successfully gather allies and secure legislative victories acquisitio.
But wait, this is exactly why we use the Gerard overlay, because when I looked at the planetary placements for House 5, it looked like a total trap.
Oh, it is a massive trap.
The geomancy says harmony, but the astrology drops a cluster bomb into the 5th house. We have the Sun, Venus, and Mars all jammed together in the sign of Cancer. Now, the Sun and Venus are peregrine, but Mars is in its fall in Cancer. Break down the mechanics of a planet in fall for us. What does that actually do to the energy of House 5?
When a planet is in its fall, it is placed in a sign that is fundamentally hostile to its core nature. Mars is the planet of severance, aggression, bold action, and martial strength.
Right, the warrior.
Exactly. Cancer, on the other hand, is a cardinal water sign ruled by the moon. It is nurturing, protective, emotional, and defensive. Mars wants to charge forward with a sword. Cancer wants to build a shell and protect the family.
Hell, they just clash.
Terribly. When you put Mars in Cancer, the aggressive drive is completely undermined. It becomes passive-aggressive, frustrated, and structurally weak.
Okay, so it's like installing a massive, high-horsepower sports car engine into a fragile wooden rowboat. The moment you try to rev the engine to go fast, you just tear the boat apart from the inside.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Yes.
If the province's ambassadors or its cultural leaders try to make a forceful, dominant, or aggressive move this week, it will misfire spectacularly. The appetite for bold, martial moves is betrayed by the watery, sensitive environment of Cancer.
So what did they do?
To succeed, they have to completely abandon aggression and rely strictly on the soft, yielding diplomacy of Puella. If they try to flex their muscles, the rowboat splinters.
That is such a specific, actionable warning. Do not act tough. It will backfire. Now, this brings us to what is undeniably the most fascinating and contradictory part of this entire reading. The great paradox axis, House 6 and House 12.
The fulcrum of the chart, really.
Let's start with House 6, which governs public health, labor, unions, and the civil service.
Here we find our second Cauda Draconis, the tail of the dragon.
The great purger, the exit door.
Yes. In the 6th house, this means labor is contracting. Health services are shedding workers, unions might be losing members or leverage, and the civil service is shrinking.
Just a massive bleed.
It is an active severing of ties in the sectors that keep the physical society functioning. And the overlay confirms this with brutal clarity. Saturn is in Leo in the 6th house.
Explain the mechanics of Saturn and Leo, because usually Saturn is the planet we rely on to keep things together, right?
Exactly. Saturn is the planet of structure, discipline, boundaries, and long-term endurance. It builds the walls and holds the load. But in Leo, Saturn is in detriment.
Detriment.
Leo is ruled by the sun. It is hot, radiating, centralizing, and expressive. Saturn is cold, contracting, and isolating. In Leo, Saturn's ability to maintain structure is just burned away. It is severely weakened.
Wow.
So structural capacity fails exactly where it is most desperately needed, in the health and labor sectors. The administrative structure simply cannot hold the workers there. They are leaving.
But then you trace the axis across the chart to House 12. House 12 is the house of hidden pressures, covert allies, secrets, prisons, and massive institutions like hospitals. Sitting quietly in the shadows of the 12th house is Fortuna Major, the Greater Fortune.
It is the most powerful, intrinsic, self-sustaining, positive figure in the entire system, and it is hiding in the House of Secrets.
The mechanics of this are mind-bending. This is why I used that hospital analogy at the beginning of the deep dive. You have House 6, a public health and labor sector actively collapsing, bleeding workers, and failing structurally.
Right.
But secretly, behind the scenes, an anonymous benefactor in House 12 has just quietly paid off all the institution's debts and secured its ultimate survival. The public sees the loss. They feel the sting of the dragon's tail. They see the strikes and the empty desks. But they don't see the massive hidden safety net because it's locked in the 12th house.
If we synthesize this into the geopolitical reality of Quebec this week, the province's most powerful protective resource cannot be seen or named. It is operating from the shadows.
Like what, specifically?
It might be deep institutional reserves that the public doesn't know about, or covert negotiations happening in back channels, or quiet allies holding the line off the record. Whatever is sustaining Quebec's institutions right now is incredibly strong. I mean, Fortuna Major is strong, but it is entirely invisible to the public eye.
It's like having a guardian angel that absolutely refuses to show its face, operating entirely off the books.
Exactly.
So we have the structural skeleton, and we have these intense axes of tension. Now we need to look at how this week actually moves through time. because in geomancy, we don't just look at a static picture. We generate the terminal figures, which create a narrative arc.
Yes. The terminal sequence acts as the geomantic courtroom. It takes the myriad details of the 12 houses and distills them into a coherent timeline from inception to final settlement.
And how is that calculated?
It is calculated by adding the dots of the lower houses together to generate new figures. We start with the right witness, which represents the beginning of the matter, the root condition entering the week. Here we calculate Fortuna Minor, the lesser fortune.
Okay, so Quebec enters the week carrying a minor, somewhat unstable advantage. They have some forward momentum or a protective factor, but because it's the lesser fortune, it depends heavily on external conditions. It's a temporary shelter, not a permanent fortress.
Exactly. From there, we calculate the left witness, which represents how the situation unfolds, develops, and behaves as the week progresses. Here we generate conjunctio conjunction, or the meeting.
Conjunctio is Mercury's neutral figure, right? It's all about bringing things together.
It is. It is the figure of convergence, alliance, and the flow of information. It tells us that the operative mode of the week is dialogue and negotiation, not combat. Alliances must be formed. Information must be exchanged.
Which perfectly explains why they can't fight the mirrored opponent in House 7.
Yes.
If the opponent is via mirroring your every move, you can't punch them. The left witness confirms this. The only way to move forward is conjunctio. You literally have to talk to the mirror. You have to find a junction point.
Then the two witnesses are added together to generate the judge, which delivers the ultimate verdict of the week. The judge of this chart is a missio loss.
The essential ruling of the geomantic court is expenditure. The province cannot retain everything it is currently holding. The fundamental, unavoidable movement of the week is one of release. Something must be let go.
But the courtroom doesn't end with the judge. We calculate one final figure, the reconciler, by adding the judge to the first house. The reconciler bridges the final verdict with the current, showing the ultimate lasting settlement. And the reconciler here is acquisitio gain.
This is the genius of geomantic mechanics. The paradox is mathematically built in.
Yeah.
The final settlement is gain, but it only comes after the judge's verdict of loss.
Right.
It's like a toll booth. The chart is essentially charging Quebec a toll. To get the acquisitio, to secure the legislative and allied gain at the end of the week, the province has to accept the emissio handed down by the judge. You cannot hold on to what needs to leave if you want to acquire what is coming. The expenditure is literally the price of admission.
Which brings up the most critical question.
Right.
What exactly needs to be released? To answer that, we move to the deep mechanics of the chart, what we call the special factors. First, we trace the way of points.
Okay, explain the mechanism of the way of points. How does tracing these dots actually show us the root cause?
The way of points is a diagnostic tracking system. We look at the judge, which is emissio. We identify its dominant elemental line, in this case fire and air are absent, so we track the active elements upward through the parents that generated it, moving back through the witnesses, up into the nieces, the daughters, and finally the mothers.
It's like tracing a digital money trail through a series of shell companies back to the root server.
Exactly. And in this chart, this diagnostic trail leads all the way back to House 1, terminating directly on Via.
Which means the root cause of the week's chaos isn't an external attack, and it isn't some sudden catastrophe. The situation arises entirely from Quebec itself being in motion. The volatility, the necessary losses, the exits, it is all generated by the province's own internal momentum and its state of transition. Quebec is the source of its own circumstances simply by virtue of traversing this passage.
They are the momentum. But to answer your question about what specifically needs to be released at the toll booth, we have to look at the Arabic parts.
Yes, the part of spirit and the part of fortune. What do these calculate?
These are mathematical points derived by measuring the distance between specific figures in the chart. The part of spirit represents the animating intention, the deeper why driving the collective unconscious. The part of fortune represents the point of material rescue, the tangible benefit, the literal gold in the chart.
And when you ran the math for this chart, both of these parts, spirit and fortune, landed in the exact same house. House 6,
Yep.
the House of Public Health, Labor, and the Civil Service. And they are co-present with Cauda Draconis, the figure of severing and endings. Just from a statistical standpoint, how rare is it for both the spiritual motive and the material rescue to land on the exact same spot, especially a spot ruled by the Great Purger?
It is mathematically quite rare, and interpretively, it is the most pregnant clue the chart offers. It explicitly tells us that the deepest intention of the province and its greatest chance for tangible material gain rely entirely on severing ties and completing cycles in the labor and health sectors.
You only win by letting go. The labor strikes, the civil service exits, the health sector contract. I mean, it looks like an absolute crisis on the surface. But the chart's mechanics are screaming that this release is exactly what unlocks the acquisitio at the end of the week. Holding on to those structures governed by a debilitated Saturn that can't hold the weight anyway, will only prevent the gain.
Let's bring the stars fully into this synthesis to see the overarching condition. We've done the essential dignity audit using the Sabbioneta overlay. Out of the 7 traditional planets, there is not a single planet in this chart residing in its domicile or its exaltation. The chart has no dignified planetary anchor.
None. Zero. The entire sky is just unmoored.
We have 2 severe debilities causing structural failure. Mars in the fall and Cancer undermining diplomacy, and Saturn in detriment and Leo undermining labor and health. The remaining 5 planets, Mercury, the Sun, Venus, the Moon, Jupiter, are all peregrine. They are wandering, they have no major strength but no major impairment.
So no sector of the province is operating at full strength this week. Everyone is just trying to get by, improvising, while morale and infrastructure actively struggle under the weight of debility. But the overlay does give us one final defining image. It maps the ascendant, placing House 1 in the sign of Pisces.
Pisces is the mutable water sign, the sign of dissolution, boundlessness, and vast currents. But the Astro-geomantic figure specifically mapped to the ascendant in this system is Carcer, which translates to prison or enclosure.
This is where all mechanics lock together perfectly. Think about Via in House 1. The Geomancy says a province is on a fast-moving road, pure transit. But the astrological overlay says they are in a bounded prison carcer surrounded by water Pisces.
Right.
You combine immense forward momentum with a bounded enclosure, and Quebec is rushing down a very narrow, walled-in canal. The water is moving incredibly fast. There is immense momentum pushing them forward, but there are stone walls on both sides. They have zero room to steer, zero room to negotiate, and zero room to change course. They just have to ride the current until it spits them out.
That is the ultimate synthesis of Via and Carcer. Containment and momentum existing simultaneously. The collective identity is hemmed in by circumstance, but moving at breakneck speed.
All right, we have pulled this engine apart piece by piece. We've looked at the fiery roof and the eroding foundation. We've traced the hasty financial announcements, the hidden hospital benefactor, and the toll booth of loss. It is time to bring the whole blueprint together. What is the single dominant storyline? What is the ultimate verdict for Quebec this week?
If I have to distill the mechanics into a single verdict, it is this. Quebec is crossing a profound threshold this week. It must release what it can no longer hold in its labor and service sectors, accepting the purge of House 6 while simultaneously managing intense, unanchored executive volatility at the top in House 10. But by accepting this necessary loss, by paying the toll, it opens the gate to massive, unexpected legislative and allied gain in House 11.
The sacrifice and the gain are intrinsically mathematically linked. The required sacrifice is in the public service structures, which are failing anyway because Saturn is in detriment. You have to let them fall. The resulting gain is policy momentum and allied support.
It is a threshold. You just cannot carry all your baggage across it.
So for you listening, how do you actually use this information? How do you watch this abstract math play out in the headlines this week? Here is the actionable, concrete counsel we can pull from this chart. First, watch the Premier's office. With Rubius in House 10, expect rash, inflamed rhetoric. If the executive panics over their eroding poll numbers or the housing crisis, that Amicio in House 4, they are going to make the situation drastically worse. They need to resist the urge to lash out.
Second, let the strikes and the labor exits happen. Do not force the health or labor sector to hold together artificially. The double concentration of both spirit and fortune on the tail of a dragon in House 6 means the threshold absolutely requires this release. The old structures must be cleared out to make way for the gain.
Third, look for legal wins. Keep a very close eye on the courts and the universities. With Letitia and Jupiter and Scorpio sitting in House 9, Quebec is positioned for a major judicial victory or a massive academic breakthrough. This is their strongest, most visible, and most optimistic asset this week.
And fourth, don't fight the mirror. With Via in both House 1 and House 7, if the Quebec government goes to war with its negotiating opponents, they are just fighting their own reflection. The left witness is conjunctio. The only path forward is dialogue, convergence, and realizing that the opponent is just as fluid, transitioning, and unanchored as the province itself is.
Before we wrap up this deep dive into the blueprint, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you watch the news unfold. We know that Fortuna Major, the absolute greatest luck, resilience, and protection available in this ancient system, is hiding in House 12. It's locked in the House of Secrets, covert allies, and shadows.
Wow.
But what happens when a society is saved by a force it isn't allowed to name? Will the public ever know who or what actually paid the debts and held the line this week? Keep an eye on the shadows, because that is where the real power is moving. The foundation might be eroding, the roof might be on fire, but the hidden beams holding the walls up are made of solid steel. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the geomantic currents. We'll be back next time to translate another chart, but until then, keep questioning the world around you and pay very close attention to what gets left behind at the toll booth. Take care, everyone.